Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we're going to be reviewing for you Empire of Sin on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by the excellent PJ O'Reilly and has been adapted for video by me. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. Romero Games' Empire of Sin is an excellent premise for a turn-based strategy / management mashup that sticks you in 1920s Chicago during the heyday of Al Capone and a whole host of other real-life gangster legends, and charges you with building up your very own criminal enterprise. It's an era that absolutely oozes atmosphere, and one that we couldn't wait to spend time in. However, it's also currently bogged down by some game-breaking bugs, poor performance, and gameplay systems that should mesh well together but haven't been executed properly. In short, it's a bit of a mess. Starting out in the dog-eat-dog world of Empire of Sin, you'll be invited to choose your protagonist from a generous roster of budding mobsters, each with their own backstory, perks, and traits, before hitting the streets in your own personal bid for power. There's a fantastic selection of characters to choose from here that includes the likes of good old Scarface himself, as well as Dean O'Banion, Daniel McKee Jackson, and a bunch of well-realized fictional choices, all of whom have been impressively designed and voice-acted. For our playthrough, we jumped into the shoes of Frankie Donovan, an Irish ex-rebel and expert marksman who does a fantastic line in swearing at every single opportunity he's given. Once you've decided who to run with, this game gets down to showing you the ropes, giving you a whistle-stop tour of its many menus, introducing you to its management systems, RPG-light elements, and XCOM-style turn-based combat. First impressions here, although the tutorial does go on a bit, are good. There's lots happening, but none of it is too hard to grasp, and you'll spend early hours wandering the streets in either a top-down or zoomed-out overworld map view, smashing up local neighborhood rackets and businesses owned by rival gangs in order to take power for yourself because you're a cheeky little sausage. You'll be looking into brothels, casinos, speakeasies, hotels, breweries, and safe houses, and each one of these properties come with both negative and positive aspects that affect the speed and volume of the dollars you accrue. And you'll need plenty of dollars here as you shell out for various levels of security for each of your establishments. More refined ambience in your bars and brothels, stronger word of mouth to bring the punters in, or to add new games to casinos and make sure the cops are well looked after so they'll turn a blind eye to your nefarious escapades. You'll also need hired goons to join you as you run around the streets of Chicago, smashing up joints and muscling in on new territory. In order to hire said hired goons, you'll need to refer to the game's Black Book, a rogues gallery of criminals, all of whom, in one of the game's most interesting ideas, have relationships and history with one another. Move your cursor over each face in this wretched hive of scum and villainy, and indicators appear on top of other mugs indicating personal links, whether they be lovers, friends, or indeed deadly foes. This system does a great job of making the game world seem alive and interconnected. Once you've hired a few thugs, you'll get down to the turn-based combat element of Proceedings, an aspect of the game that's initially exciting, atmospheric stuff full of swearing, spraying of Tommy gun fire, and suitably vicious melee attack animations, all set to a consistently excellent jazz soundtrack. However, this is also where the wheels start to come off in this particular 1920s Cadillac sedan. The turn-based combat here is tediously average at best, when it decides to properly work at all. Enemy AI is pretty poor in general, running in and out of cover, exposing itself to attacks, failing to take its chances, and making completely nonsensical decisions with regards to where it positions itself. If you happen to accidentally run into a battle solo, something that happened to us consistently as our squad mates randomly broke themselves off before engagements, it's absolutely possible, and more often than not quite easy, to take down an entire room full of rivals on your own. Not a good sign for the underlying strategic mechanics or the AI at work here, let's face it. Character models are also heavily overused. You'll most often find yourself in a room full of clones, with the locations themselves not doing much to add variety, as they too are repeated ad nauseum. There are a nice selection of skills for each of your teammates to unlock as they level up, including automatic overwatch, extra turns upon successful kills, brutal frenzied melees that can be chained together, and so on, but Empire of Sin dishes all this stuff out far too readily, at least least on normal difficulty. And before long, turn-based engagements that should be thrilling, challenging, and tense little standoffs with rival factions become an absolute cakewalk. Indeed, we very quickly switched from being the negotiating type who'd accept a peaceful deal with the local gangsters to just being a sort of fingers in your face, don't talk to us or we'll stab you sort of criminal crew, rocking around town drenched in blood. Things do unravel quite quickly here in terms of challenge, and it's not just with regards to the massively repetitive combat. All the various aspects of management, there are tons of them, and they're all presented in terribly busy menu screens that are realistically painfully difficult and time-consuming to pass, begin to expose themselves as completely unnecessary. Why bother taking time to tinker with the minute aspects of your empire when all you really need to do is ransack, kill, and bully, take everything and pump all the money into your properties ASAP so nobody dares come near them? You can, in fact, go one better and just cut off the head of whatever snake happens to be attempting to bite you at any given time. Head straight for the boss of whatever family you're dealing with, sack them off, take what they own, and lock a district down. It's pretty easy to do even with a low-level crew. All of these problems are pretty damning, but we'd still be willing to overlook many of them, still willing to sit down and have fun just because the era itself and the characters which exist within it are so compelling. But then the bugs creep in, the constant performance problems enter the fray with stuttering, pausing, crashing, glitching, and just straight up not responding. This Switch version of the game looks pretty decent all told. Graphically, it's been downgraded, there's plenty of blur and pixelation and low-resolution textures, but nothing we wouldn't expect in order to get a game of this scope and scale running on Nintendo's console. However, we eventually reached a point where our superhuman reserves of patience were tested to their absolute limit. We endured several crashes to the console's home screen that meant we had to reload back to an earlier point in our campaign, a big annoyance in a game like this, as well as numerous full-on freezes that required a restart. We also pushed on through broken animations that saw our gangsters skate around combat engagements rather than move their legs, and waited for egregiously long periods of time for members of our team to perform an action once we'd chosen it. Things really can get pretty choppy here, with fights slowing to a crawl as the game struggles to keep up with itself. However, Empire of Sin then started to refuse to respond properly at all, allowing us to move units around a fight well enough but not make any attack or any other action with them. We started to skip turns and put our goons into Overwatch in order to try and snap them out of it, but in the end, we had to give up on the entire affair as it wasn't letting us finish fights unless we just stood around and let ourselves die, which is really not ideal in a game with permadeath. A day one patch for Empire of Sin has been released already. Unfortunately though, most of the pressing issues we detail here happened after we applied it. We've also been assured by Ramiro Games that multiple other fixes and patches are incoming. However, at this point in time, it's pretty much impossible to recommend you jump on this one. There's so much promise here. It's such a good idea, such a neat meshing together of genres, and we love that Black Book Nemesis style mechanic, the hugely atmospheric sit-downs with rival bosses, and the excellent soundtrack, but it really is pretty botched and broken as things stand at the moment. Beyond the bugs as well, the management mechanics are too easy in this game. There are lots of aspects to running your own empire, but most of them are just far too easy to ignore. The turn-based combat also needs a lot of work to make it feel genuinely engaging. Overall, this one is a fantastic idea that we dearly want to love, but as things stand, it would be criminal for us to recommend you jump in. Empire of Sin is undoubtedly an excellent idea, a clever meshing together of management sim and turn-based tactical action that's all set in a hugely compelling era in Chicago's criminal history. There are some really cool mechanics here as well, the well-executed overworld map of the town, the gangster black book with its complex relationship, and those tense sit-downs with rival gang lords. However, all of this promise is held back by copious technical problems, game-breaking bugs, and management and combat systems that feel half-baked and scrappy. There are more patches and updates planned, and we desperately would like to see this one sort itself out, but as things are at the moment, it's pretty much impossible to recommend, and it remains to be seen if future updates can bash it into shape. You've reached the end of the video, and you know what that means. Yes, it's time for Alex's personal thoughts. I've got to say that, yeah, I'm really disappointed with this game, to be brutally honest with you, and that's not a nice feeling. It genuinely isn't. There are so many fantastic ideas here that have so much promise, but it just does not live up to them. The ideas on paper sound really good, but the execution leaves a hell of a lot to be desired, and this is even before we start talking about technical stuff. After a couple of hours, I entered into a situation where another gang lord had, you know, sort of discovered that I existed, and he was like, hey, you're coming in on my patch, or whatever it is that they were saying, and he wanted to sit down, so I was like, okay. The sit down happened to take place in a district that I wasn't in, and for the life of me, if there was a way for me to get to that district, I couldn't bloody work it out. I thought, okay, I'll just go there manually, but I kept getting these constant things popping up telling me that there's a fight breaking out, you know, the card sharks are interfering with some place that I own. And it's like, okay, so they appear outside and all my guards have only got melee weapons, and I think that was my fault, but regardless, it was still very annoying. And then, you know, if I didn't win that fight, they would go in, and then I'd have to fight them again. And yeah, it wasn't even using the characters that I'd chosen. These were just the random goons that exist in the establishments that I own. It just wasn't interesting, it wasn't fun, and I didn't have any time to breathe. It was literally, I'd do a fight, I'd win or lose, and then honestly, like 3 seconds afterwards, if that, another notification, another fight I have to do. And it was just exhausting. I felt like I couldn't do what I wanted in the game because the game was telling me what I should be doing, and what I should be doing was the combat over and over again, and I just wanted to expand. I wanted to explore, and the game wouldn't let me. Also, it runs like poo. This game is overflowing with potential, but it just doesn't manage to bring it all together. It's not a cohesive package. It is hugely disappointing, and I really hope that there is something, you know, they can salvage this with patches and updates, but given its current state, well, we'll just have to wait and see.